Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks so much for joining us. Midweek, Joe's off this morning. We're going to begin with the White House facing growing backlash after President Trump's stunning proposal to take ownership of the Gaza Strip.
They had to do their own and focus on their own. Take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
In a press conference with Israel's Prime Minister, the president proposed the U.S. redevelop the war-torn enclave and keep it under U.S. control. The proposal would also displace more than 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza during that reconstruction.
We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
For more, we are joined by NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. We will also be speaking with Yasmin Vasugian joining us from Tel Aviv. Gabe, I'll start with you. Good morning. Talk us through President Trump's plan here. What exactly would it mean for the U.S. to take over Gaza, as he said? Are we talking about U.S. troops on the ground?
Well, Savannah, good morning. The shock, both here in Washington and around the world, cannot be overstated. There are just so many questions about how this would even work and how this land grab would unfold. Now, as you just played, President Trump yesterday breaking with long-standing U.S. policy of wanting a two-state solution involving the Israelis and the Palestinians, and seeming to suggest, not ruling out that U.S. troops could be sent to Gaza. Now, the president also suggesting that neighboring countries such as Egypt and Jordan might take in Palestinian refugees. It should be noted that both countries and others around the Middle East have said that is not really an option. And really, there's been widespread condemnation around the world from China, Russia, and many other countries that have spoken out overnight, talking about the feasibility, questioning the feasibility of this plan. Now, as you said, the president arguing that the U.S. could get involved to perhaps create what he described as the Riviera of the Middle East. And there are just so many questions here about how the Gaza Strip, which is home to about 2 million Palestinians, whether many of them would even want to leave. The president calling the area a living hell and suggesting that why would they want to return? Of course, as I said, that is being met with a lot of skepticism, condemnation, and just simply disbelief around the world, Savannah.
And Gabe, tell us about lawmaker reaction on both sides of the aisle to this.
Well, this is receiving bipartisan backlash. Senator Chris Coons, for example, yesterday saying that he was speechless. And overnight, we are getting more Republican reaction as well. Even some Republicans, for example, really questioning how this would even work. Some lawmakers calling it deranged. Even Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina calling the proposal problematic, saying we'll see what the Arab world says, but it would be problematic in many ways. Senator Tim Kaine is the one who called this, quote, deranged nuts, and that calling the U.S. military presence in the region a magnet for trouble. And even Senator Thom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina, saying there are a few kinks in that slinky. And asked to elaborate, he said, it's obviously not going to happen, Savannah.
Gabe, I want to shift gears before I let you go. Something we talked a lot about yesterday. Overnight, USAID, they announced almost all direct hires will be placed on administrative leave this week. This is after the Trump administration's push to dismantle the organization, something Elon Musk has been very involved in. What does that mean at this point for aid around the world? Is the organization, for all intents and purposes, shut down?
Well, it is not completely shut down yet, but it appears to be heading that way, as you said. Overnight, employees received an email saying that all direct hires will be placed on administrative leave starting on Friday. And essentially, it's the organization, the agency has been taken over by the State Department. It was Secretary of State Marco Rubio being appointed the acting director. And designating one of his deputies to look for ways to cut waste from this organization. But there are major concerns around the world that the loss of USAID could lead to the U.S. losing influence in other parts of the world, such as Africa, the Middle East, and elsewhere, and that other countries, such as China and Russia, could step in to fill the vacuum. Savannah.
All right, Gabe, thank you so much. Let's go now to NBC News correspondent Yasmin Vasugian. She joins us from Tel Aviv. Yasmin, many U.S. allies have been quick to distance themselves from these comments by the president about the U.S. taking over Gaza. What's been the reaction from the people of Gaza and from Palestinian Authority?
I think across the board, when it comes to Palestinians specifically, when it comes to militants, Islamic militants, when it comes to the Palestinian Authority, hearing from Islamic Jihad, hearing from Hamas as well overnight, they completely denounce any notion of Gazans, of Palestinians having to leave Gaza. I think, Savannah, it's important to understand what represents home to them. These are individuals who have lived in Gaza for an incredibly long time. They were forced to evacuate to the south because of the bombings and the war that were happening in the north of Gaza. After the ceasefire, many of them by foot made their way back to the north to see what was left of their homes, finding mostly rubble. But instead of then going back to where they came from, they are making homes within the rubble because for them, Savannah, Gaza is their home. This is their community. The only kind of comparison I can make, I think, for many Americans that have been watching, obviously, the LA wildfires and the devastation happening there is for so many people that lost their homes and their belongings in those Los Angeles wildfires. Yes, it was incredibly sad, but it was the communities that were so incredibly important to them. The churches they went to, the coffee shops that they gathered at, right? The playgrounds, the schools as well. For these Gazans, those are the same concerns. Those are the same communities they have as well. We have an incredibly brave team of journalists on the ground in Gaza, Savannah, talking to Palestinians about this very issue. If they would ever even consider leaving Gaza, as President Trump is saying. Let's take a listen to what one individual had to say, and then we'll talk on the other side.
This call for displacement is not new. Many plans talked about this issue and failed. Of course, the plan of U.S. President Donald Trump will fail because Gazans hold on to their land, country, and soil of their nation. Many wars passed on Palestine, and specifically Gaza, and did not lead the Palestinian people to migrate or travel to other countries. The people are steady and will remain until the last breath in this life.
And that is a sentiment of many Palestinians. And by the way, while the Israeli media may be celebrating this, while the right wing of the Israeli government celebrating this, as well as we have heard, there are a lot of Israelis, especially here in Tel Aviv, that I've been speaking to repeatedly that believe that Gazans should be able to remain in Gaza, not unlike what the president and the prime minister are now putting out there.
And Yasmin, on that very point, we did hear the president repeat his view that Jordan and Egypt should take in Palestinians while, in his view, some type of rebuilding happens. But those countries, other Arab nations across the region have rejected that. And obviously, we just heard from Palestinians directly there. What more are we hearing from these other countries about these latest comments from Mr. Trump?
Putting it frankly, Savannah, it feels as if a nuclear bomb has gone off in the Middle East. The King Abdullah of Jordan going to the United States to meet with the president February 11th. Al-Sisi, Egyptian president, meeting on Thursday with the president as well. Obviously, major players there. We've heard from the foreign minister of Egypt rejecting this notion, continuing to talk about rebuilding Gaza. We have heard from MBS, from the kingdom in Saudi Arabia, rejecting this notion of Gazans having to leave Gaza. We've heard from Iran as well. As I mentioned earlier, we've heard from Islamic militants, the Palestinians, the PA. Across the board, what we are looking at really is a unifying, possibly, of the Middle East. There was a certain point, Savannah, as many of us remember, especially leading up to October 7th, where we were looking at normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, right? It was this unprecedented moment for the possibility of normalization of relations between these two countries that have been really enemies for quite some time. Instead, now, this sentiment coming from the White House, along with Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, could very much rock that potential and rock the Middle East and unify nations that had not been unified before. And let's not forget, by the way, the possibility of the unification also around this issue of Russia and China, Savannah.
All right, Yasmin Vasugian from Tel Aviv for us on our top story this morning. Thank you, Yasmin. Now let's get to more upheaval at the FBI. Thousands of FBI agents who say they fear for their safety and their privacy are suing the Justice Department. So they're trying to keep the Trump administration from exposing their names amid threats of retaliation from some recently pardoned January 6th rioters. On Tuesday, 2 anonymous groups of agents filed lawsuits after being instructed to fill out a survey detailing their role in the Capitol riot investigation and the probe also into Trump's possession of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. The agents also claim they have been told that they are, quote, likely to be terminated in the very near future for that work. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian, as well as our legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Good morning to both of you. Ken, I'll start with you. Just what's the latest on the attempt by the Trump administration to gather this list of FBI personnel who worked on January 6 cases?
Savannah, after contemplating whether they actually had to comply with this directive, top FBI officials decided that they did, that it was a lawful order. And so last evening, they turned over a list of FBI personnel who were involved with January 6th, thousands of people, including details about what they did on the cases. But they did not include names on that list. They identified these agents and other support personnel by employee identification number. And what that reflects is a sort of campaign of quiet resistance, I would call it, by the acting leadership of the FBI, who was installed by the Trump administration, by the way. But Acting Director Brian Driscoll has made very clear in recent days that he is not on board with this idea of targeting FBI agents who worked on January 6 cases simply because they were ordered to work on those cases. And look, there's great concern that there will be mass firings. There's already been firing of 8 top officials at the FBI. But so far, that hasn't happened. It remains to be seen what exactly the Justice Department is going to do with this list of people. They can certainly match up the numbers with the names. But these lawsuits that you mentioned, they're class action or attempts at class action lawsuits, one filed by the FBI Agents Association. They are designed to prevent the release publicly of these names, because what the lawsuits say is there's a danger that FBI agents are going to be doxxed, that their families are going to be at risk, because you've already seen January 6th defendants, pardoned by Donald Trump, publicly releasing the names of FBI agents who worked on these cases, Savannah.
Danny, let's bring you in here. Before I ask you a question, I want to play something and ask you about it. This is part of a recent interview from former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio. So he had been sentenced to 22 years in prison. He then, of course, was pardoned. He said this upon release. Let's listen.
They didn't care about the evidence. They cared about putting Trump supporters in prison. Well, now it's our turn. Now it's our turn. I'm happy that the president's focusing not on retribution and focusing on success. But I will tell you that I'm not going to play by those rules. The people who did this, they need to feel the heat. They need to be put behind bars. They need to pay for what they did.
Danny, is kind of like a simple way to think about these lawsuits that they are an attempt to prevent something like what Tarrio is saying there from happening, them going to prison. I mean, he obviously doesn't necessarily have direct authority over something like that, but is involved here. What do you make of these lawsuits as it connects to those comments, what they're requesting?
That's a perfect summary. And the magic word that you used was prevent. And I think that's where the plaintiffs might run into some problems due to a concept essentially called ripeness. And ripe is the same word you would apply to fruit. This lawsuit is basically like an overly green banana in that just collecting information, doing an internal survey, yes, it could potentially lead to all of these harms, to doxing, to Enrique Tarrio putting it out on his website. Anything like that is possible. So the sentiment, I understand. But at present, what we're talking about is an internal compilation of a list of data about employees. And I'm not entirely sure that these concerns about what could happen in the future are enough to be able to legally prevent the government from sending around a survey and asking for this information. Even though the fear may be real, when you boil it down, they're just asking at this point for these agents to give up information essentially to their employers. So that might be an uphill battle for a harm that hasn't happened yet.
Ken, at his confirmation hearing last week, Trump's pick to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, he said there would be no retribution, at least from the administration, but there have been firings at the FBI. Do these concerns about a purge at the agency then have some weight to them? How do you square those two things?
It's really hard to square, Savannah, and Kash Patel has not said anything publicly since all this unfolded. Not only did he say there wouldn't be retribution, he said he was not aware of any plan for mass firings. And hours later, the news broke that most of the senior officials at the FBI were being fired, and then that there was this other plan. So you had Democrats on that Senate Judiciary Committee that he was before, screaming bloody murder, saying they want another hearing here. But so far, the Republicans have not said a peep. And Charles Grassley, the chairman of that committee, longtime champion of whistleblowers and of integrity in government, has said in a statement to us that he's fine with the firings because he believes there's been misconduct at the FBI. So it remains to be seen what Kash Patel's posture will be to all of this. He's got a confirmation committee vote next week. And then Pam Bondi was just confirmed as Attorney General. She starts work today, Savannah.
And Danny, how much of a factor are the firings that we've already seen and that Ken was just discussing there going to be for a judge in this case, for these FBI agents who brought this lawsuit?
Yeah, from a distance, you can see that what's going on is a government purge of sorts. So that is certainly part of the spirit underlying this lawsuit, but it may not factually have that much to do with the determination. The plaintiffs are alleging violations of their First Amendment right to associate. In other words, you can't tell federal employees you have to be a Republican or you have to be a Democrat. They do have a point there, but I think the challenge is linking that theory of responsibility to just the government at this point asking for information on a survey, even though their fears are probably real. This may lead to a deprivation of their First Amendment freedom of association, political association. But if it hasn't yet, the court's going to have a hard time granting relief.
All right, Danny and Ken, thank you both very much. Well, President Trump is only in the third week of his second term. Been a lot of news, but the legal challenges to his agenda are stacking up. It comes as he's moving rapidly to reshape the federal government. As we've been discussing this morning, that includes attempts to shut down agencies, fire government officials without warning, override Congress, and in some cases, the U.S. Constitution, and take control of federal spending. Taken together, all these actions are raising questions about the limits of presidential power. Michelle B. Goodwin joins me now with more on this. She's a professor of constitutional law and global health policy at Georgetown Law School. Michelle, good morning. So we kind of just wanted to talk through this, have a little bit of a reality check here, because, part of this was Trump, of course, campaigned on being this major change agent. We knew that he wanted to do things like take a look at federal spending, really cut some of that down. Let's start with these ongoing attempts to overhaul the federal government. Can the president eliminate agencies like USAID? We've been talking about that since yesterday. Now a new one, potentially, the Department of Education. Those were established by Congress, but then with the stroke of his pen, with an executive order, with him desiring to reshape the government, is that a possibility?
No, those are not legal, just simply because the president puts ink to paper and words are typed on it doesn't mean that it's lawful. During his last administration, he was sued over 400 times in his capacity, and many of those lawsuits were successful. Judges issued what are called injunctions or stays, which meant that those executive orders could not go into effect because they were unconstitutional. Now, we'll see a lot of this with the flurry of executive orders that he has signed. One then might ask, well, why is he signing these executive orders if only they'll be blocked or there will be injunctions that are put forward? Well, it's also very costly to hire lawyers or lawyers to do this and then to present those cases. So while he's signing these executive orders and while there are organizations that are teeing up, and many already have filed lawsuits, it means that it takes time, it takes money, and organizations are doing that. And he will, I'm sure, continue to put his ink to paper, but it does not mean that it is lawful.
But in the interim, we also are seeing these agencies effectively shut down. So should they be doing that? Do they need to be doing that?
Well, there are some that are fighting back. So it's been agencies and it's also been employees of the government. So we saw basically a midnight sweep of inspector generals who then said, we're not leaving. You can't do this. You do not have the lawful authority to dismiss us as you have. The same is true as the president has done with various budgeting matters where they are not in his control, but yet the control of Congress. And this raises some very important issues in terms of government accountability, not just from the newly elected president and this rather roguish, thuggish behavior that's taking place, but it also says something else about the responsibility of members of Congress to, in fact, take on the responsibilities that their constituents expected when they elected them. And it will also say something, too, about our judiciary and their role in government. There are checks and balances against each branch of government, and the president has at least two of them. That includes Congress, and it also includes the courts.
Let's talk about government spending, which you mentioned. Much of it controlled by Congress, right? But when it comes to how much the government spends, what it actually spends money on, now, of course, there's an entire new department, the Department of Government Efficiency, whose sort of mission here is to cut out spending. There's a lot of questions over that. That's that one that Elon Musk is overseeing. How much power does the president have here?
Well, this is congressional authority. And so the president is, in fact, skating on very thin ice. But again, it depends upon what the checks and balances will be expected from Congress in pressing the brakes on here and letting the president know that these are not areas in which he has control. What we see taking shape is incredibly unprecedented. This has not been seen before. This was not seen during the Bush administrations, either one or two, during the Reagan administration, during Nixon's administration, during Ford's administration. So it's quite extraordinary what is taking shape here. And part of that, I think, has actually caught some people off guard. And this includes members of Congress who are in the Republican Party who are trying to figure out exactly what they should be doing because, in fact, it is unprecedented.
All right, Michelle, thanks very much for your time this morning. This morning, two of President Trump's most controversial cabinet picks. It's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard. They're one step closer to confirmation after securing narrow victories in their respective Senate committee votes yesterday. Now, besides Democrats who were united against him, the biggest threat to RFK Jr.'s nomination came from Louisiana Republican Senator Bob Cassidy. He's a doctor, and he challenged the nominee for health secretary on his widely debunked claims that vaccines can cause autism. Cassidy was considered a swing vote, but he ultimately voted yes after receiving assurances from Kennedy about immunization policy. As the nominee for intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard was grilled about her support for Edward Snowden and the controversial government surveillance program he exposed. And despite her history of dramatically changing stances on various national security-related issues, she managed to convince the Republican majority to vote in her favor. Well, now both nominees are expected for full Senate votes by next week, which we will, of course, stay on for you. Well, if you've been to the grocery store, you know egg prices are soaring. And get this, now some restaurants are cracking under the pressure of these skyrocketing costs. Waffle House, of course you know it, it's a popular chain of diners, is joining a growing list of restaurants imposing surcharges on egg dishes because of shortages tied to bird flu. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park has more.
Shell shock with the price of eggs continuing to soar. The average price for a dozen now more than $5. That's a 50% spike in just the last year.
They've gotten really expensive.
Avian flu infections, also known as bird flu, has led to more than 13 million hens being slaughtered since December and at least 140 million birds killed since 2022. The move to slow infections disrupting the egg supply in a big way, leading to price surges and empty shelves at grocery stores. Eateries coast to coast also feeling the pinch and passing their cost increase to customers. Waffle House diners now paying 50 cents more per egg, a surcharge the company says will be short-lived. We cannot predict how long this shortage will last.
What about you personally?
Me personally, I'll just stop eating eggs here.
This is just the time that we're living in. It makes sense. They've got to make up for, the prices that they're paying.
And it's not just Waffle House. This restaurant in New York is charging $2 extra for egg items. While in Los Angeles, Kara Haltewanger says the cost of eggs at her new breakfast spot went from roughly 25 cents to $1 per egg.
I'm in a rock and a hard place because I'm paying about as much for eggs a week as I would be to employ someone almost full time.
Our thanks to Kathy Park for that report. Well, according to the Department of Agriculture, they've spent over $1 billion compensating farmers for birds they've had to euthanize. Now, even as the bird flu is coming under control, they predict the price of eggs will still soar another 20% this year. They are also tough to find at the grocery store. Well, now to the latest on the deadly plane and helicopter crash that rattled D.C. and the nation less than a week ago. Authorities said on Tuesday that they have now recovered the bodies of all 67 victims from the Potomac River. In an update Tuesday, the National Transportation Safety Board said data from air traffic control showed that the Black Hawk helicopter was flying higher than is customary under FAA regulations near the airport, and that more work will need to be done to verify the helicopter's data. Now let's get you a check on your Morning News Now weather. We've got new details on a winter storm developing over the Midwest. Angie Lassman's got her eyes on that system and everything happening across the country. Angie, good morning.
Hi there, Savannah. Good morning to you. We've got plenty of alerts up from that same system that you just mentioned. Almost 100 million of us from essentially Oklahoma all the way to Massachusetts under these winter alerts. Most of them winter weather advisories. You see that ice storm warning in bright purple there across parts of the Appalachians, though. We've got rain, snow, and ice all on the table from this system here as we get through the day today. And it's specifically going to be focused across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. But I wouldn't be surprised if we deal with some icy conditions, some slick spots, some difficult travel, specifically anywhere from Kansas to Ohio through the day today. That system, though, on the move, and you can see all that mess of wintry weather starts to work its way to the east tomorrow. And especially during that early morning commute, I think the I-95 corridor will have to deal with the wintry mix. And again, those hazardous conditions when it comes to being on the roads, maybe some potential air travel delays. So we'll watch for that. We'll also still see some of these kind of gusty showers and maybe storms developing across parts of the Tennessee Valley tomorrow. That system will be kicked out of here by the time we wrap up our Thursday. But before then, we've got to get a couple of inches of snow on the ground, specifically for parts of northern New England. Notice those highest amounts, 4 to 5 inches. The farther north you go, places like New York, Philadelphia, maybe picking up about an inch or so. Nothing that's going to slow you down all that much. But when it comes to the ice accumulations, that's a different story. We'll see potentially about a quarter of an inch in some of these higher elevations across parts of the Appalachians. You can see that brighter pink is about 1/10 of an inch. So again, taking it slow on the roadway is going to be a must here through the day today for some parts of the Midwest, and then especially tomorrow for parts of the Northeast. We'll also watch for a couple of spots that could potentially deal with some power outages. We've got a flooding concern too. Notice where we see 1 inch to 2 inches of rain again across parts of the Tennessee Valley, in Ohio Valley, and that's where we're going to watch for that flash flood risk today. Essentially Clarksburg, Cincinnati, stretching to Bowling Green, Louisville, included in there, and Lexington too. So heads up for folks that are going to be on the roadways there. One other note, we've got some dense fog advisories in effect across parts of the Southeast. So low beams on, taking it slow, going to be necessary this morning. 24 million people are included, and those throughout this morning. Now, temperature-wise, we're looking pretty good if you're looking for some warmer weather, especially when you live across parts of the southern tier of the country. Mid to upper 70s from New Orleans to Austin and out towards Phoenix. We've got 83 degrees on tap. That sounds like a dream to me today. In Tampa, 66 for Nashville. These numbers are anywhere from 10 to 15, even close to 20 degrees above normal for this time of year. And that actually sticks with us tomorrow for a lot of the country. Notice 80s in Tucson and in Dallas. We see 70s in Columbia and in Memphis. We will still have that sliver of the northern part of the country dealing with really bitter cold kind of temperatures. Savannah, notice Fargo at 12 degrees. Cleveland will be into the 20s. And by the time we wrap up our weekend in places like Boston, we'll be back to the 40s. But we hang on to those 80s and well into the 80s for our friends in Texas into the weekend.
I forgot what 80 feels like.
Me too. It was 40-something yesterday and a little sunshine, and I felt like I was back.
88 degrees. I'm like, geez, can't wait for that months from now. All right, Angie, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.